Chapter 9 Baking with Colette. Despite the rain pattering against our bedroom window, I woke up the next morning humming Frere Jacques, remembering our moment with the street musicians. I felt a surge of confidence. I dived straight into the music with Colette and Sylvie. I hadn't planned for it. I had just done it. I'd made some mistakes, but had lots of fun. Sylvie and I had enjoyed Bastille Day, a day to celebrate French independence. I smiled to myself, realizing that I felt a new sense of independence too. Now that I was learning to jump to new situations, I wanted to experience everything here while I could. I couldn't get enough. I would have loved to say all this to Sylvie, but it was too much for her to understand, or for me to say in French. Instead, I said, "Bonjour, Sylvie." "Bonjour, Grace," she replied. "Comment vas-tu?" This time I had the answer to "How are you?" "Je vais bien." And I meant it. I was fine. I was more than fine. Poor Lily. She unfortunately was not doing as well as I was today. She had a cold. Her cute little nose was red, chaffed, and running. Apparently Aunt Sophie had been up all night with her. While she slept in with her door half closed, Mom tried giving Lily a bottle, but Lily was so stuffed up and her nose so gunky that she had trouble breathing and taking the bottle at the same time. In frustration, Lily squeezed her eyes tight and cried harder. "Is she going to be okay?" I asked Mom as I walked the baby up and down the hallway, around the kitchen and the living area, and then down the hallway again. "Yeah, she'll be fine," Mom said. "Still, I'd forgotten how hard it is when a baby is sick." "Did I get sick when I was a baby?" I asked. "Did you walk me like that?" "Well, you were a pretty healthy baby. But what I learned early on is that you didn't want to be walked like this. Josh did, but you wanted to be put down in your crib. I think you want to figure this things out on your own." Mom turned away and made the circuit again as she came back my way. Lily stopped crying, and then Mom sat down in the rocker near a table full of baby supplies. She used a small rubber bulb to gently suction Lily's running nose. I scrunched up my face. "Don't try that thing on me." Mom shrugged. "Well, she's too young to blow her nose into a tissue. We have to help her somehow." But the device helped. Somebody somewhere must have had a baby who needed help, and that somebody came up with a creative solution. Another good idea, I thought to myself. Soon Lily started breathing a little more freely. "There you go, little girl." Mom laughed softly. "Honey, I remember the day you found your thumb," she said, glancing up at me. It was as if you'd been searching for the answer. I could almost see the little light bulb go on in your eyes. At that moment, apparently your thumb was on it. Good thing I don't need my thumb anymore. No, now you're good. You're fine as long as you can jump on a computer and research whatever springs to that busy mind of yours. Or head to a kitchen to do some baking. "True," I replied. I watched Mom finish giving Lily her bottle. They looked so sweet together. This moment deserved a photo. Click. Then I asked Mom if I could email the photo to Grandma and Grandpa. I was surprised when Grandma emailed me right back to thank me. She must have finally figured out her new laptop. "Grandma, what a little sweetheart! I wish we could be there to see our new grandbaby in person. But the bakery's too busy for us to leave for the summer. It makes me happy, though, that you and your mom are there to help out." "Speaking of helping out, Grandma, I keep wishing I could do more actual baking here, like real French stuff." "Maybe you just need to ask?" I smiled. Sometimes the simplest answers were the hardest ones to see. "Yeah, maybe I just need to ask. Thanks, Grandma." Downstairs at the patisserie, soft French music came down from Colette's phone. I hadn't heard any music in the patisserie kitchen before. Maybe she was trying something new, too. "I like it," I whispered. "Good," she whispered back. "But others?" Nobody in the kitchen complained about the music, but as her phone app shuffled through the various songs and artists, Colette sometimes sang along. Her voice was like wind chimes, adding to the pleasant whir of chatter and mixing machines, chopping, and oven timers. After I finished my first round of dishwashing, I was ready to take on more responsibilities. I needed to master a few basic words first. I stood at Sylvie's elbow as she cut a Genoese cake with a pastry knife. Sylvie? She turned. I pointed to a bowl on the counter. Now I knew how to ask. What is this? Qu'est-ce que c'est? Un coup de poule, she replied. I repeated the words slowly, and then I pointed to a wooden mixing spoon. Qu'est-ce que c'est? Un spalé en boys, she said. Sylvie beamed, seeming eager to help. As we stepped around the bakery, I pointed and asked more questions. She helped me learn the French words for apron, oven, door, and floor. I learned how to say spoon, measuring cup, plate, small bowls, medium bowls, and large bowls in French. She taught me words for baking, stirring, whisking, beating, frosting, decorating, and sprinkling. I wouldn't remember all the words after hearing them only once. I started to recognize some of them right away from the bakers as they worked and talked to one another. I was only beginning. I had so much to learn. But now I felt hungry, ready to sponge up every little word and phrase and skill around me. Then Sylvie started testing me. Qu'est-ce que c'est? She was the teacher. I tried to be a smart student, but when I confused words or butchered saying a word, Sylvie cracked up. Hey, you wouldn't be a good teacher if you laughed whenever your students made mistakes, I said, smiling. She was still giggling, even though I knew she didn't get what I'd said. Well, Colette laughed out loud, and I started to giggle too. I couldn't help it. I tried to swallow my next outburst, but I couldn't. Pretty soon, we were all giggling so loud that Uncle Bernard looked over our way, and we giggled 2 seconds longer. I drew in a deep breath and made myself stop. Colette, I finally ventured. At home, I love to bake. Can you teach me how to bake here? Oui, oui. She looked over at Sylvie, who was brushing an egg white on something. Sylvie, she began, and then rattled off a whole lot of French I couldn't understand. Sylvie finished the last of what she was doing and then joined us for what I silently called Baking with Colette class. Over the next few days, Colette took us through several recipes. First were the madeleines. We mixed flour, salt, sugar, and baking powder, and then added egg yolk, melted butter, and slightly beaten egg whites. The recipe should have been easy, I thought, but I made a few blunders. With all the measurements in metric, it felt weird measuring to the nearest gram or millimeter. Where were the final cups and tablespoons? I ruined a whole bowl of batter by measuring out 25 grams of salt instead of 2.5 grams, or a half teaspoon. When Colette sampled the batter, she made a face. Start again, she said, and quickly emptied the bowl's contents into the garbage. I was so embarrassed. Back home, I would have known the difference between teaspoons of salt and a half tablespoon. Teaspoon. But here I was so focused on grams that I started thinking I was measuring sugar instead of salt. Yuck. After that mistake, I gave myself my own time out, or at least time to better understand these measurements. After that, I made myself return to my dictionary and refresh my memory of important baking words. Sel, salt, sucre, sugar, and farine, flour. By the end of one workday, we were putting the finishing touches on a vanilla millefeuille, a layered pastry with a glazed top. The swirled chocolate and vanilla icing was so beautiful, almost like a painting. I thought of the lines waiting to get into the art museum. The Louvre. Wasn't baking an art too? C'est beau, said Sylvie, admiring creation. We should taste, ooh? We should taste, ooh? We cleaned up, hung up our aprons, and arranged the slices of millefeuille on pretty plates. Then we sat outside the patisserie. The shade of stone buildings fell across our little table, and the beautiful French tea that I actually helped bake. I felt so proud and amazed that despite my mistakes, I'd learned something really cool and new baking skills. Pulled out my phone. Click. Do you want to look or eat? Colette asked me and Sylvie. I turned to Sylvie as if she understood whether or not what was the phrase. Then it came to me. Sylvie, veux-tu manger? Oui, oui, she laughed, then took a bite. Bon appetit, Colette said. I joined in, chewing slowly and letting the flavors linger on my taste buds. Colette and Sylvie both waited for my opinion. Ooh la la, I said. That evening, we posted our bakery creation on my blog. My caption, Art You Can Eat. Under a late afternoon sun, I biked with Mom. I biked after as Mom jogged. But every few blocks, I had to stop and take pictures. I couldn't help it. I snapped photos of the display cases in every boulangerie and patisserie we passed. Click, 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 click. Grace, Mom scolded as I caught up to her. I straddled my bike beside her, waiting for her to catch her breath before the light turned green. Mom leaned forward with her hands on her thighs. Between Lily's cold and now your obsession with taking photos on every block, I wonder if I'll ever get back to my running routine. She took a few long, deep breaths and then began talking again, more to the pavement than me. I thought I could manage to stay on track while we were here, but I've fallen way behind on my schedule. I wasn't sure what to say at first. Mom sounded so down. But then I thought what she might say to me if I were feeling that way. Mom, you're in Paris. Did you think that everything would be the same as at home? She hesitated and then said, Of course not. So don't be hard on yourself. Try to stay loose, I added. I stepped in front of her and shook out my arms and legs as dramatically as I could, just as she'd done when we'd first arrived at the airport here. Mom stared at me with a straight face for a second or two, as if deciding whether to laugh out loud or to scold me again, and then she broke into a smile. Look who's the teacher now. When the light turned green, she was ready to run again. We crossed toward the river, where Panta was at his easel, capturing Notre Dame towering above the shimmering scene. It would have made a perfect photo. I almost grabbed my phone, but I didn't. This time I just enjoyed the view, keeping pace with Mom so that I could finish her route without stopping. When we returned, little Bon Bon was hanging around the patisserie door waiting for dinner, just as she had been for the last couple of nights. Mom smiled. Hello, little dog, she said, extending her hand, but Bon Bon backed away, regarding her suspiciously. She has a name now, I said. Oh, Bon Bon. That's really cute, Mom said, keeping her hand outstretched. Soon Bon Bon inched closer again, sniffed her hand, and began to wag her little tail. You like that, don't you? Mom said sweetly. Stay here, Mom. I'll be right back, I said, and then hurried inside. I returned with the bowl of dog food. I set it down in front of Bon Bon. Here you go. She wolfed down her food, and then she dunged the paw in my hand, as if to say thanks. Mom watched the two of us thoughtfully, and then she said, Grace, remember that just because you name her, feed her, doesn't mean we can bring her home. I know. I sigh heavily. Mom went on, I still can't help wondering, sweetie, if the most responsible thing to do is to call the animal shelter here and get her off the street. But Mom, you heard Aunt Sophie. You heard Aunt Sophie. She might be put down. Mom reached for my hand. Or she might be reconnected with her owners. Or find a new home. Might. I don't like that word. Mom rubbed my back. I know. I'm sorry. Then she changed her tone. But Grace, one thing's for sure. You've shown me that you can be very responsible. This stray is lucky to have you caring for her. At least until she finds a home. Mom was complimenting me, but I felt a big lump in my throat. Bon Bon looked up at me, her eyes so round and so dear I wanted to cry. Instead, I pulled out my phone so that I could capture that sweet face and this moment. How many more would we have together? Click. Long after Mom went into for a shower, I sat beside Bon Bon, worried what would happen when I left. Colette couldn't take her in. Sylvie couldn't either. There had to be somebody who could give her a home.